Do what you know, and then relax and sit back and let the other person, dominate the conversation. I just thought you got more flies with honey, the idea of having the guests be tense and worried. I don't know, that doesn't, you want them to relax and you want them to come back.
Behind an unremarkable set of buildings near Burbank Airport sits one of the most extraordinary garages on Earth. For decades, while the world knew Jay Leno as the host of The Tonight Show, he was quietly building something few people were ever invited to see. Hidden behind those doors are machines with unbelievable stories, impossible rarities, and a passion that became far more than a hobby. What has Jay Leno been protecting all these years? And why has that garage become the most fascinating part of his legacy? Join us as we step inside the world very few people have ever seen. The building that looks ordinary. The Big Dog Garage does not announce itself. It sits near Burbank Airport in a complex of buildings that have been expanded over decades as the collection inside them has grown beyond any single structure's ability to contain it, and from the outside it reads as unremarkable commercial real estate, the kind of place people pass without slowing down. This is entirely by design. Jay Leno has always treated the garage as a private world, rather than a public institution, accessible only by special invitation, occasionally opened for charity events or media coverage, but never functioning as a tourist destination anyone can just show up to. What happens when someone does get through the door is the kind of disorientation that occurs when the scale of something exceeds what the mind was prepared to process. The collection, which now exceeds 180 cars and 160 motorcycles. Jay Leno's collection spans from 1900 steam-powered vehicles to modern hypercars, representing more than a century of automotive evolution, and the jump from a 1906 steam engine to a 1994 McLaren F1 parked a few spaces away produces a kind of temporal vertigo that automotive writers have been trying to describe accurately since the first cameras were allowed inside. The crucial detail that sets the Big Dog Garage apart from every comparable private collection in the world is the condition of its contents. These vehicles are not museum pieces maintained in static, non-operational preservation, while their value appreciates on paper. Every car in Jay Leno's collection is kept in running condition by a full-time team of mechanics and restorers whose job is to ensure that anything in the building can be driven today. The McLaren F1 gets taken to the grocery store. The steam cars are operated. The motorcycles are ridden. Jay Leno is not a collector who acquires things to protect them from the world. He is a collector who acquires things to participate in them. And the distinction between those two approaches to collecting produces an entirely different relationship with what you own. He started doing this in 1990, the year he took over The Tonight Show from Johnny Carson, the most professionally significant year of his life to that point, and the year he chose to begin building something that had nothing to do with his profession and everything to do with who he actually was. The two streams, the television career that made him famous and the garage that made him genuinely happy, ran in parallel for 34 years, and the garage kept growing long after the television career had its natural ending. So what is actually in there, and what does it say about the man who chose every single piece? The Duesenberg that nothing else can touch. The single most significant object in Jay Leno's collection, by essentially any measure you choose to apply, historical rarity, monetary value, engineering achievement, or simple aesthetic magnificence, is a 1934 Duesenberg Walker Coupe, and its significance comes from a fact that stops conversation cold every time it is stated. There is exactly one of them. One in the world. The 1934 Duesenberg Walker Coupe is the only example of its kind, and it sits in Jay Leno's garage near Burbank Airport in California. The most expensive car in Jay's collection is, without a doubt, his 1934 Duesenberg Walker Coupe, which is currently valued at around $20 million. But the dollar figure misses the more significant point. Money cannot produce a second one. If Jay Leno's Duesenberg were destroyed tomorrow, the object it represents, a particular collaboration between one of America's greatest automotive manufacturers and a coach builder working at the absolute peak of the art of custom bodywork, would cease to exist in physical form. The only copy of something is not a collectible. It is an artifact. Duesenberg, as a company, represents the absolute pinnacle of American automobile manufacturing in the pre-war era, a moment when American engineering ambition was pointed skyward rather than inward, producing machines that were not just transportation, but statements of what the country believed was possible. The Model J Duesenberg, introduced in 1928 with its twin overhead cam straight-8 engine producing 165 horsepower, at a time when most American cars were making 40 or 50, was a demonstration that America could build something that made everything European competition was producing look ordinary. The Walker Coupe is that already extraordinary platform clothed in a body commissioned and executed specifically for this one car. The Duesenberg is the crown of the collection. The car that comes closest to it in terms of modern significance, driving experience, and pure engineering achievement was purchased for far less money in the mid-1990s and is now worth considerably more than it was then. If the Duesenberg is the soul of Jay Leno's garage, the next car is its greatest modern masterpiece. The McLaren F1 that gets driven to the grocery store. When McLaren produced the F1 between 1992 and 1998, the automotive world understood it was witnessing something unusual, a car engineered without compromise toward the single goal of being the best driver's machine ever created at that moment, regardless of cost, regardless of commercial consideration, regardless of whether the resulting vehicle made any practical sense. They built 106 of them in total, including road cars and race variants. Jay Leno owns one of the road cars, a 1994 example. The 1994 McLaren F1 is one of his most valuable cars, valued between $14 and $17 million. When he bought it in the 1990s, he paid considerably less than that, which is what happens when you acquire a masterpiece before the world has fully processed what it is looking at. The McLaren F1's central driving position, the driver sits in the middle of the car with a passenger seat on each side and slightly behind, and its naturally aspirated BMW V12 engine, capable of driving the car to a then world record top speed of 240 miles per hour, represent a specific philosophy about what a car should be that has not been replicated at the same level before or since. The grocery store detail defines Jay Leno's relationship with the McLaren in a way that no financial figure could. He has said publicly that he drives the F1 to run errands, that a car designed to be driven belongs in use rather than in preservation. A $14 to $17 million car in a supermarket parking lot between a minivan and an SUV is a statement about what collecting should mean and what it should not mean. He has brought the F1 out for Jay Leno's Garage episodes, talking through its engineering specifics, with the depth of understanding that comes from having lived with a car for years rather than simply studying it. His knowledge of the McLaren F1 is not that of an enthusiast. It is ownership knowledge, the kind that accumulates through decades of maintaining and operating a particular car. The McLaren F1 is generally considered the last great analog supercar, the final moment when driving ability and mechanical engineering were the primary design priorities before electronics and driver assistance systems became dominant in car development. Owning one is owning a philosophical argument made in metal and carbon fiber, and Jay Leno drives his to the grocery store. But the car that almost ended his life was considerably older and considerably less glamorous than the McLaren. The 9 days in the burn center. On November 12, 2022, Jay Leno was doing what seemed completely normal for him, getting his hands dirty inside the Big Dog garage and working on one of the machines he loved. The car on his workbench that day was anything but ordinary. It was a 1907 white steam car, a century-old machine powered by steam rather than a conventional gasoline engine. Jay was attempting to clear a clogged fuel line, and the fix seemed straightforward enough. He needed to blow air through the line to remove the blockage, but something went terribly wrong. Instead of simply clearing the line, fuel sprayed back toward Jay. The nearby pilot light ignited the gasoline, and within seconds, his face was engulfed in flames. Suddenly, I got a face full of gas, and the pilot light jumped, and my face caught on fire, Jay later recalled during an interview with the Today Show. Fortunately, Jay wasn't alone. His friend Dave Kalaki was working alongside him and immediately sprang into action. That quick response was crucial because the situation could have become even more dangerous in a matter of seconds. Jay suffered serious burns to his face, hands, and chest, but he survived the initial explosion. For someone who had spent decades working around powerful engines, antique cars, and machines that could go wrong in unpredictable ways, it was a brutal reality check that even an experienced mechanic isn't immune to accidents. But what happened afterward revealed something just as striking as the accident itself. After initially being taken to a hospital, Jay was told that he needed specialized treatment at a burn center. Instead of simply waiting for an ambulance to take him there, however, he made a decision that had more to do with his wife than with himself. Jay went home first. His wife, Mavis, no longer drove, and Jay was concerned about leaving her without knowing what had happened. Only after making sure she knew what was happening did he head to the Grossman Burn Center in West Hills, California. Jay spent 9 days receiving treatment for third-degree burns to his face, hands, and chest. He underwent multiple surgeries, including reconstructive procedures performed by Dr. Peter Grossman. The injuries were serious enough that doctors had to rebuild portions of his face, but Jay handled the situation with the same humor that had defined his career. Later, he joked that he had essentially been given a brand new face, and it looked even better than the original. It was classic Jay Leno, turning a terrifying experience into a joke before anyone else had the chance to feel sorry for him. But remarkably, the fire wasn't the end of his run of bad luck. Just 2 months later, in January 2023, Jay was involved in another accident. This time, it wasn't one of his cars that caused the problem. He was riding a motorcycle when he was knocked off the bike and suffered several injuries, including a broken collarbone, 2 broken ribs, and 2 kneecaps. 2 serious accidents in such a short period could have convinced almost anyone to slow down. Jay wasn't most people. When he was later asked whether the fire had made him nervous about returning to his garage, his answer was immediate. No. The accidents may have left Jay with scars, broken bones, and plenty of reasons to be more cautious. But they didn't change the thing that had driven him for decades. He still loved working on cars. He still loved motorcycles. And, perhaps most importantly, he still loved getting his hands dirty inside his garage. If anything, the incidents demonstrated just how deeply that passion was woven into his life. And that's what makes Big Dog Garage so fascinating. The machines inside aren't simply expensive toys sitting behind glass. They are projects, pieces of history, and mechanical puzzles that Jay actually wants to understand and work on himself. But even among the countless cars and motorcycles filling the garage, there is one collection that stands out for an entirely different reason. Jay has dedicated an entire space to a single motorcycle brand. And somehow, he doesn't own just one or two of them. He owns 26. So why did Jay Leno devote an entire room to these legendary motorcycles? And what makes a collection one of the rarest and most remarkable private motorcycle collections anywhere in the world? 26 Brough Superiors, and the room built specifically to hold them. The Brough Superior collection is the most extraordinary of these sub-collections, and the numbers around it are staggering enough to require repetition to fully absorb. Jay, who's a huge fan of the Nottingham-built Rolls-Royce of motorcycles, hasn't just one of the ultra-exclusive machines, nor two or three. He has 26 in what is the largest Brough collection in the world, with a dedicated room all their own. The Brough Superior was produced between 1919 and 1940 by George Brough in Nottingham, England. And its reputation as the Rolls-Royce of motorcycles was not a marketing claim, but a genuine industry assessment. T.E. Lawrence of Arabia, owned 7 of them and died riding one in 1935. The machines were hand-built to individual orders, each unique, representing the absolute peak of what motorcycle engineering could produce at the time of its creation. Approximately 3,000 were made in total across the production run, and finding working examples in the 21st century requires either extraordinary luck, extraordinary money, or both. The Brough Superior room in the Big Dog Garage represents the largest private collection of these machines in the world. The collection is the purest expression of what the Big Dog Garage actually is. An act of sustained love for the craft and history that produced these objects, expressed through the acquisition and preservation of more of them than any other person on Earth has managed to accumulate. And yet, the Brough Superiors are only one room in a building full of rooms. The machines from before. Cars existed. Somewhere near the McLaren F1 and the one-of-one Duesenberg, there is a 1906 Advanced Steam Traction engine and a 1909 Baker Electric. Machines from the moment in American history before anyone knew what automobiles were going to become, before gasoline had won the argument about how personal transportation should be powered, before the shapes and systems and conventions that define what we think of as a car had solidified into the forms we recognize today. Notable among his collection are the 289 AC Cobra, 427 Shelby Cobra, a 2017 Acura NSXV-IN003, and the 1994 McLaren F1, as well as a 1906 Advanced Steam Traction engine and a 1941 American La France Series 600 fire truck. The range from a 1906 steam traction engine to a 2017 Acura NSX, with the third vehicle identification number ever assigned to that model, represents a span of 111 years of motorized machinery, all of it present and operational in the same set of buildings. The Baker Electric of 1909 is particularly significant within that range because it represents the road not taken, the moment in automotive history when the internal combustion engine and the electric motor were genuine competitors for dominance, before gasoline won the market and before a century passed and the electric motor began fighting its way back. Jay owning a 1909 Baker Electric and a McLaren F1 simultaneously is, in its way, a complete survey of where automotive technology has been and what debates it has had with itself across the intervening decades. The 1941 American La France Series 600 fire truck, a full-size American fire engine from the Second World War era, in a private garage in Burbank, is one of those objects whose presence in the collection helps you understand the collection's philosophy. The fire truck is not a sports car. It is a working vehicle from a specific historical moment, representing a kind of American industrial manufacturing that produced machines of extraordinary utilitarian ambition. And Jay Leno thought it deserved to be preserved and operated. So he kept it. That is the through line of everything in the Big Dog Garage. Not monetary value, status, or rarity for its own sake, but the conviction that certain machines deserve to keep going. The steam cars that still make steam. The motorcycles that still run on the roads of California. The electric car from 1909 that still runs on electricity. The fire truck that could still fight a fire if one broke out nearby. Jay Leno's collection is what it looks like when someone decides that the right response to extraordinary machinery is not to protect it from the world, but to keep it alive in it. The estimated total value of the collection ranges between $52 million and $104 million, depending on which valuations are applied. And the range reflects both the genuine difficulty of valuing one-of-one historical objects and the consistent appreciation that rare automotive history has demonstrated across the decades. But Jay has repeatedly said in interviews that he does not consider the collection a financial asset. He thinks of it as a responsibility, the stewardship of objects that would cease to exist in operational form without someone willing to spend the money, time, and expertise required to keep them running. Which vehicle from Jay Leno's collection would you most want to drive? The one-of-one 1934 Duesenberg that cannot be replaced, the McLaren F1 he takes to the grocery store, or one of the 26 Brough Superiors he has dedicated an entire room to? And do you think any collector in the world will ever match what he has built in that garage near Burbank Airport? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.